he walked away from that hyper-growth environment, started to bootstrap his own thing from scratch. Sachin spent 10 months building a massive platform for a big enterprise client before charging them a single penny.
Whatever advice was out there, I just couldn't apply it. You can be really good at raising money. That doesn't make you a successful businessman or a founder. Don't raise too early. Raising too early might actually hurt you in the long run because you might not have a business that you're growing, or you might not have an idea that actually deserves to be raised. What I left my job for definitely is not what I ended up building.
And I think this is a really important thing for founders. Don't get too married to the idea. The idea isn't the goal. Building something that's useful is the goal. Welcome to iwon, which, if you're not new here, you know it stands for It Wasn't Overnight. The podcast for B2B and SaaS founders who want real lessons, not just the polished after story. The reality of really building in the trenches. And today my guest is amazing. His name is Sachin Goyal, and he is the founder of ClarityLoop. Now, on paper, Sachin is an incredible person with lots of experience in high growth tech, the sort of pedigree that most founders chase. He scaled Multiverse, FanDuel, so he knows a lot about hyperscale. But then he did something completely unexpected. He walked away from that hyper growth environment, that corporate traditional sort of thing, and started to bootstrap his own thing from scratch. And if you think he's following the standard startup playbook, the stuff you hear from Y Combinator and whatever, you are totally mistaken. Sachin spent 10 months building a massive platform for a big enterprise client before charging them a single penny. Talk about building relationships. That is a lesson in and of itself. It's a totally different approach to what you hear elsewhere, and it's worked well for him. Sachin, welcome to the show. Are you ready for lots of questions?
Michael, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here and really looking forward to our conversation. And I'm sure I'll learn a lot while answering your questions.
I hope I learn a lot about you too, and I hope everyone else does. Obviously, you scaled FanDuel to its massive rise and grew Multiverse and their engineering team by 4 times in 8 months.
Yep,
Why turn your back on that sort of hyper growth stuff to start bootstrapping your own thing?
The major reason has been my passion for the problem, something which over time I got addicted to. At some point, I just felt like something has to be done about it, and I'm really well placed to do something about it. So this is the time for me to do it. The other support, I suppose, like the catalyst that worked in my favor or that sort of helped me make that decision was the recent advancements in AI. So some of the crazy ideas I thought were really hard to implement before AI became more accessible, more say mainstream. But then once that happened, I thought, oh my God, some of those things which we just dreamed about are now possible. So let's just do it. So that was the main reason, I would say.
And what were the things that you dreamed about that you didn't think were possible in terms of features?
I think one of the things which I always dreamed about was I hated sitting in the performance review processes, either being assessed myself, like assessing myself or assessing somebody else. Part of me always felt like this is a bit of an exercise that we all have to do. There's a lot of choreography involved into this exercise, but the real substance is missing. I used to dream, would it not be great if somebody else did all the grunt work, somebody else did all the work that I've done my job or doing my job. Why do I have to prove what I did? It's almost like having some sort of co-pilot. Now we're using that term, but like somebody who could take care of just presenting me in the best possible way rather than me doing it. And I don't know if you already found it out so far or not. I'm not a really good communicator, or my English is not my first language. So I definitely struggle with that as well. These are the sort of things. And now I'm sure you could see with the kind of tools we have at our disposal, the tools which can connect to the workflows, tools which can connect to your work, analyze the work patterns, analyze what you're up to in a sensible way and not in a creepy way, and then present yourself as the best version of you. But not just presenting, I think it opens up a different possibility altogether where you could actually become a better version of yourself by knowing about those things ahead of the time. This was one of the, so just to be more concrete, I suppose, as an engineer, my responsibility was writing code, reviewing people's designs, their architecture, approach, etc., etc. What is now possible is that one of the things that ClarityLoop really does very well is, let's say if a team of engineers working together, they're just collaborating, do their day-to-day job, and it is able to analyze their work patterns and then put them into this sort of pattern. And if there's a pattern that is evolving, it starts to nudge people, notify people at the right time for them to do something about it. So this is partially the dream that is almost like fulfilling now is that feedback or performance or reviews were not something separate. They were somewhere in the work that we were all doing. We just had to separate out that from the real work. So now, because something is doing it on a regular basis and without getting tired, it's much better to have those signals, those ideas, those prompts ahead of the time and then do something about it.
From what I hear you saying, you're addressing that need where when you need to sit down with your team and analyze how everybody's getting on, it's about creating a real win-win, right? Like, as in, it's just as easy for the employee to forget what they've done as it is for the manager, I suppose, to really be able to fully analyze the output of somebody on a, whether it's monthly, quarterly, whatever basis. Is that what you're saying? Essentially, that's what you're trying to solve.
That's definitely one change that we are trying to drive. But if we are able to drive that, it also opens up some really big opportunities where managers are not just there to assess, they're also there to help or coach, right? And for that, they need the right sort of signals, the right sort of data, right sort of visibility into things, which are really hard to get. And also without any biases. Since we are doing that work, why not do it pretty much on steroids, right? Managers have that visibility, that insight, and also the individuals, right? So they can themselves control their own career, but managers are also able to support and grow them, help them at the right time, at the right moment.
Are traditional HR practices totally outdated? Would that be fair or not?
They have been outdated for a very long time, honestly. I think it's been one of my constant frustration is that like the real HR processes, especially which are related to engagement and growth and sort of performance, they are very old, designed for big enterprises, which have a certain structure in place. Things don't change that often. So you can get away by just doing this sort of form filling exercise. But the reality of the modern workplace is like people, teams, everything is changing almost every week. So trying to force that into this new thing has always been the problem. And I'm not saying it myself. I think if you talk to anyone, especially people working in slightly bigger companies, they'll probably agree with me. They all know deep down this is definitely not fun. It's not really the most effective way of doing it. Highly inefficient, right? And very costly thing that we all do. But the thing is, like, what is the alternative? Right? Alternative has been really hard. Honestly, like providing an alternative has been hard. So hopefully, like what we're doing with ClarityLoop makes the difference.
You mentioned about this idea of having the dream set of features that you could build. Did you start ClarityLoop because you solved the problem with AI or because of AI? Or are you saying that the timing was right as well and there were a variety of factors? And I'm asking that question because there are a lot of founders out there with ideas they think are amazing and they may or may not be. I can't judge. The market judges fundamentally who are looking at AI and thinking I can build anything, right? The whole imagination dream thing. Do you feel that you started it because you'd finally solved the problem thanks to AI, or did AI make the whole process so much simpler from every perspective?
The way I approached it is, look, I was in a very well-paid job. And I think for me to come out of that and not earning any money should have been well justified, right? I think for that to be able to justify it, I needed to really prove that idea before I spend even a single hour on that problem. So one of the things I tried to do in the beginning was talk to as many people as I can. And I definitely use my connections, right? I was in the senior leadership positions, working as VP of engineering, director of engineering, or whatnot. Lots of similar minded people we were always kind of discussing this problem. Because if you ask any engineering leader, what is your number one priority? They will all say, I want to have a high performance culture, right? So I spoke to a lot of my colleagues, a lot of friends, a lot of people I worked with in the past, and I think almost like validating my assumption, right? And I tried to ask them questions in a way that doesn't influence their answers as much as possible. I'm sure everyone heard of this book called The Mom Test. I probably didn't follow it by heart, but I tried to follow that advice where don't try to put words in their mouth. Don't try to convey them into a certain way. Let that come out. And then you start to see if this is what you're thinking is exactly something there or not. And then I think once I went through that exercise, I definitely saw some people, some really senior leaders were like really excited about this problem. So I don't think even they understood the solution. We were not even talking about the solution at that point. We're just talking about the problem, right? And it's okay, we'll figure out the solution. Got some ideas on the high level, right? How do you solve it? But then, is this a real problem? Is this something that we can actually do something about? And then in the beginning, when I was talking to a lot of people, then about 4 or 5 sort of leaders in that space, they got really excited about this, right? And they started to give their own time talking about this problem. So I didn't have any effort getting them on a call or like getting any favors from them or anything like that. I knew that they were really excited about it. So they will actually give me advice. And one thing I definitely realized at that time are like people are way more generous with their time and advice than I originally thought. So asking as much as possible was definitely I got used to in the beginning. Then sort of that translated into, actually that helped a lot for the business, because that relationship that I built in the beginning, in the very early stages, by listening to them, giving my vision to them as well, and then creating this sort of core of what it could be, ultimately they became one of the first customers and one of the first paid customers of the product as well. So that journey involving them in the early stages, hearing their thoughts, understanding it deeply, and trying to definitely change that, then the technology and the solution and everything comes.
Would it be fair to say what you're saying is, for founders out there listening, that they should not be afraid to ask as many questions to as many people as possible? And like you said, don't try and take them down a specific route with your questions. Let them be open, like really open, which is hard because you're
Which is
excited about something, right?
Yeah, it's really hard. I'm not sure whether I was very good at it. I would be honest with you. I tried it, but I definitely try to explore things in a very wide way in the very beginning. So I had like massive sort of notes all over the place. This room was full of notes at that time. It was very unstructured in the beginning, but then over time, I started to put a bit more structure to it. I started to put, okay, I need to decide at least some path and then try to narrow it down into that. Eventually, look, I am responsible. I am accountable. I am also the one who has to do it, right? So ultimately, it is your decision. But I think what you're trying to get here is as much data as possible, right? As much unbiased data as possible. You figure out there is a limit of how much unstructured data you can process. But then once you have some idea of like there's a theme evolving, this is definitely which is where a lot of people are. One sort of indicator I had was when I was talking to somebody and I mentioned something and they started to really passionately nod about something, then you know that there is something there, right? Or when
That's the aha moment where you go,
yeah,
there's
exactly.
something there. Yeah.
There's something there. So I started to do that as well. I started to, before going to these meetings, I had this list of things where I had like lots of yeses or lots of nods. I didn't know what they were. And then I started to randomly use them as well in the conversation. And sometimes nobody cared about those things. Probably 1% did. But over time, definitely some of the things. And by the way, all of these things that I'm talking about, I suppose, are very different from my original thinking, right? What I left my job for, thinking that this is what I'm going to build, definitely is not what I ended up building.
But you ultimately, and I think this is a really important thing for founders, is don't get too married to the idea. The idea isn't the goal. Building something that's useful is the goal. It's easy to get super passionate about something, but when you start, I like how you talked about kind of reading that body language stuff, where people start nodding, getting excited and willing to give their time. That is a great sign that there's something there. In terms of the investment side of things, right? What do you think the biggest, I'm not going to say lie, but myth there is that sort of investors or incubators talk about in terms of early stage founders and raising capital around their idea?
So just like every founder at that stage, I watched probably every video that is out there for YC advice, for most of the incubators. I have a huge amount of respect, and don't get me wrong, that they are all really good advices. But I think just like everything else in the world, right? Everything has a context. And I think those videos which are designed and developed in a room somewhere wouldn't have your context or your situation in the mind. For example, this advice on the pivoting, right? That's something which a lot of people say, that do not spend too much time on the idea if you're not seeing traction. Get something out there quickly and see if it's working there or not. And all of these advices are really good. But I think, first of all, if you're working in a B2B environment, it's a very different world than say B2C, right? So
Enterprise
you
is hugely different. Yeah. Like
exactly,
one
exactly.
client can make all the difference, right? Like,
Exactly. I do consider myself like a bit more old fashioned, right? I'm not probably like the most agile and whatever the leanest startup founder. The way I look at things is if I am using a product and that product is giving me value, I'm willing to pay for it, then that's a good product. If there's a product which is not giving me value, I'm not going to pay for it, then it could be a really good product, but I don't really care about, right? And the same principle applies for that for everything else. Now, I think it's as simple as that. Now, whether you call it MVP, whether you call it like lean or whatever, ultimately the person you are building the product for has to use the product and not get pissed off or not feel, oh, this is an unfinished product or this is not really a good product. This is not solving my real problem. Honestly, like one thing which nobody says, what I found from my own experiences as a B2B, particularly as enterprise customers, B2B founders, is that you really have to get the money out of their pocket, right? For that, you need to not only convince one person, you have to convince an army of people in that company. They will
and
all
it's
have
about
their own sort of
stakeholders, right? It's all about people being invested in something.
exactly.
And yeah,
And then all of
sorry.
them have slightly different needs. And if you're talking to the finance person, if you're talking to an HR guy, if you're talking to the CEO, they'll have their own sort of opinions and expectations and things. And it's not going to be easy. They don't care about your vision. They don't care about your sort of MVPs. They probably are more comfortable paying for a massive company, like big company, so they don't have to use their brains, than taking a risk with a startup, right? So honestly, whatever advice was out there, I just couldn't apply it. I just couldn't apply it. And I may be wrong. I'm still learning and I'm still going for it. But I managed to get like a really big customer by persistently listening to every single thing they were saying, supporting them, not worrying too much about like what the product roadmap will evolve into, very focused on I need to solve their problem and help them in a better way, right? In my sort of approach, obviously I pivoted within that domain quite a lot. But sometimes I was focusing more on the talent side. Sometimes I was focusing more on the performance side. Sometimes I was focusing more on the engagement side. So there was a lot of pivoting within the product, but not like the classical, like you build out a small thing, throw it out there. If it doesn't work, then you build something else completely different and take your learning from it. That's how I approached it. I don't know if this answers your question, Michael, but
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does. Because ultimately, I deal with a lot of enterprise B2B founders, especially from a marketing point of view, right? And like, it's the whole concept of building for your dream client, right? And maybe you only need 50 of them to make it a real business or 20. It depends on what you make.
yeah,
But the point is, you're not talking about creating the next Instagram. You don't need 1 billion users. You're building something that helps deliver real value within a business. So I agree that a lot of the advice out there is much more B2C focused
yeah.
than perhaps thinking about the enterprise B2B side of things. And to that point, do you think that venture capital is a growth accelerator, or have you ever found that a trap? The idea of trying to build for investment, or do you feel quite unshackled by that? As in, you don't need to do that. Are you building on purpose not to do that?
There's a part of it which is slightly personal decision. People have their own sort of expectations from what they want to achieve from the business, right? Some people want to build very big business very fast. They don't really grow quickly. And some people want to not do that, right? I'm definitely on the second side. I took the path where I consciously didn't raise any funds and I didn't invest too much time and energy into trying to project myself as that company, right? From day one, my focus had been on supporting the customers, building a really good product for them. And then if they are happy, then they will pay me enough to flourish this business in the long run. Honestly, it has worked. And luckily,
Yeah,
it has worked.
it has worked. It has worked.
Right?
It's the opposite of the advice that your story is really cool. Because if you don't mind me saying that, to me, it's cool.
Thank you.
You might not think
Thank you.
it's cool. It's cool because I have conversations like this so often, and not these conversations generally aren't public, right? But if you land that one big client that can help you build something that you really want to build and a problem that you really want to solve, then you don't need to worry necessarily about building something to scale or becoming the next unicorn or whatever. You can build gradually And of course, if you're really great at the customer service side and support and you're just so good, A, they'll never leave. And B, they'll tell other people. I assume that's your thinking.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you. Definitely, that's been my thinking. And by the way, I've been part of the company in very senior leadership position, which were like very heavily funded. I've seen both the pros and the cons of those things, right? Again, like this is a personal decision, but I feel I would rather build a really solid product, because once you take huge amount of investment, then the focus becomes growth. It is not a founder-led business anymore. It is not a business which is able to focus on the product quality as much. It will be more about grow. Personally speaking, that is something I can say with a lot of confidence, is then even if you want to raise, don't raise too early. Because I feel raising too early might actually hurt you in the long run, because you might not have a business that you're growing, or you might not have a product that you're proud of, or you might not have an idea that actually deserves to be raised. Getting money is a craft, right? And you can be really good at raising money. That doesn't make you a successful businessman or a founder. So yeah, you could spend 5 years just doing that, but then I would rather have that clarity that this is something that I'm doing is actually real, solves a real problem, people like it, and then grow at my own pace. But then if at some point I do want to grow fast, that option is always there, right?
But you built the right foundations, right? And I think that's what you're saying. Rather than going, I've got an MVP, there seems to be loads of traction, my churn rate is low, which would be fabulous if those things were all true, and there's no real competition. That's a rare commodity. In terms of, I agree with you, in terms of trying to raise too early or trying to raise frequently. I think the con that I hear most often to raising, I don't know whether you agree with this, is the fact that essentially you're giving away control. And you really are. It's not, this idea of driving for growth doesn't just mean that. It means all decisions mean that.
Absolutely. Giving away control might be okay at some stage, but I think you have to remember that giving away control means that your customers are not going to get the same kind of support they were getting before through you directly. You wouldn't be able to run the business at the same speed that you can today, right? You can have 10 AI agents running the engineering and the sales and the marketing, and you still are sitting on top of the decision-making power, versus you have two more people on the board seat, have a very different ideas, and then like business is going in all the directions at the same time. I definitely chose the first one versus the second one. What you were saying, people have an MVP and then going out there for the raise. Honestly, like in the last couple of years, what I'm seeing is that because of AI, people are not even building an MVP, right? There's just a drawing and a really fancy deck, and you're able to raise. That's something I really want to do, push away from myself. Like I just didn't want to go that path of very solid idea, really convinced that this is the next big thing, research behind it as well and everything, but not substantial, like the exercise of going through the customer, understanding problem, enough interviews to know that people do care about this problem or not. Like all of that has to happen. That is, I think, very important.
I really like the way that you think about it as well. And this is great in enterprise software, because ultimately, when we're talking about building something that's a great product that solves a big problem that people love, ultimately is about building real relationships. It's not just about that idea of, you can't, to take a weird example, say you were sending out thousands of emails versus having a conversation with the one person that you want to and building a real relationship with them, right? Which one's more likely to be long-term sustainable? Your version is the building relationship face-to-face with that client, right? It's deep relationship, deep connection, deep support. It's real connection versus the idea of, as you say, if you present like a wireframe and an idea, and then you say, we're going to build the whole thing with AI, odds are it probably won't work the way you expect. And all these, there are many other issues, right? But I think people are getting too excited and expectations aren't right, because ultimately it takes years to build something great.
Absolutely.
It's still work.
Absolutely.
Because humans are buying and they need to know a business, trust a business, and know what it can really do for them. So that brings me to a really interesting point, right? So like, obviously traditional HR stuff, 360 feedback, things people think are complete box ticking exercises often. Everyone says the answer is this whole idea of continuous feedback. That usually just means giving already busy enough employees or managers more forms to fill out. How are you planning to fix that? So I like the idea, but how does ClarityLoop fix that?
Our mission is really helping teams develop performance continuously. And we really take each word in that mission very seriously. Honestly, like it's much harder than that. Everybody says like continuous performance. But if you go deeper into understanding like how exactly you make it continuous, because teams are busy, as you said, right? Like people, especially if we talk to an engineer saying, oh, you need to fill out this form, you need to fill out this review or survey or a feedback. They're like, please get out. I'm busy. I don't have time. That doesn't make it less important or less useful. Like for the company, this is important. For that individual, it is very important. So our trick was to how do you actually do that in a way? And you have to understand why people behave like that. And there were a few theses that we developed. We actually did some psychological research on it. There's a research paper that we also published on it. But ultimately, it comes down to the context, right? Ultimately, it comes down to that we historically thought that feedback, performance, engagement, all of these things are like separate from the day-to-day work. And you look at them as like, these are HR things, and this is like the engineer thing or customer support thing or the sales thing. And our thesis was like, no, they are same thing. People doing their job is where they perform, where they feel angry, where they feel happy, where they have decided whether they want to continue with this company or not, right? All of these things happen when they're working. So we wanted to get in there. So what we did was we built out this platform that actually connects into the tools where the work is happening. And then we built out this sort of system that is really good at analyzing patterns. Okay. So let's say if a team of engineers, I'm just taking engineering as an example, but same thing applies to, it's very generic as like customer support, sales or anything. People working together, collaborating on something together. That's where sort of you can detect patterns. And our system basically analyzes those patterns. And when there's a theme evolving, it will turn that into a nudge. So, say if you and I are working together, Mike, and you are, say, reviewing my code or you are reviewing my design document or something, and you've been consistently saying, Sachin, you're doing amazing on this part, but you know what, you could do this something differently. And you're not being very data-driven in your approach to solving this problem. And if there's a pattern evolving, then ClarityLoop will give you a nudge saying, hey, Mike, based on your recent collaboration with Sachin, looks like there's something that you wanted to tell him. Do you want to turn that into a feedback for him so he understands that better? And then it will have the initial draft of the feedback, all the dots combined, like where it's coming from. And you don't have to be really good at giving feedback because like when it comes to summarization, when it comes to writing in English, when it comes to what is the right template to fill out this thing or that thing, AI is really good at that. You'll have an initial draft, all the dots filled up, context is already there. And more importantly, you're reminded about it at the right time. This makes it easy for you to do the course correction, either for me or yourself in time, right? And we try to do that. And the same principle then applies to almost everything to do with career. So whether it is engagement surveys, performance reviews, managers having their one-to-one, leadership looking at different insights, all of these things supercharged with this pattern recognition system.
Here's an interesting question. If we take the theory that it's monitoring patterns in my work, right? One of the operational challenges I can only imagine might be the fact that people might feel like they're being watched. Is that ever the surveillance state sort of thinking? Is that been a concern or an issue that you've had to confront throughout the process?
And that's a fair concern, like especially if you look at it as like it's a performance system, it's about your career, and then suddenly you're looking at my work patterns, what's going on there. So the way we approach it is you really don't have to go towards the sensitive data, so like people's private conversations or emails or Slack conversations, none of that. What we actually look at is the data that is generally discarded. So for example, GitHub or Jira or conference pages, people are generally working there in a more public capacity, not like in a private capacity, right? So that data is always there. And by the way, those systems already use that data. What we look at it is like, it's almost like recycling the data. So looking at something that companies generally don't care about, but there's a lot of signals that you can get out of it, right? So we look at that data and you'll be surprised, Mike, like how much you can derive from something which is already there. So it's not monitoring, it's more of analyzing publicly accessible within the company environment data for that individual.
That's good. That kind of puts a lot of people's minds at ease. And ultimately, I presume, and this, by the way, guys, this isn't a plug for ClarityLoop or anything, but I presume you've already this is an obvious thing that would come up, right? You guys are watching me, blah, blah, blah. And fully understandable, right? So then presumably your thinking is you've got to make sure that it's a win-win, right? For the employee and for the manager, to make sure that it's not hurting people career-wise or whatever. Is that right?
Absolutely. So this is quite deep, actually. In the traditional sense, majority of the sort of assessments in the past, when you look at who is performing, who's not performing, has been very output driven. So what I mean by that is, okay, look at, and I'm not saying every company does it. In fact, there are a lot of good companies who don't care about those kind of metrics. But there's a lot of companies, especially nowadays, where, okay, how many AI sessions you had, how many GitHub commits you did, how many pull requests you merged, right? And these are the metrics which are, if you're looking at them and then deciding people's performance, you're really setting yourself and that person for failure, because they can be faked, first of all. And that's definitely not a measure of somebody's complexity of the problem or their behavioral side of things. It doesn't really capture any of it, right? What we try to do is move away from that sort of assessment model towards outcome focused. So not the output, but the outcome focused. What really matters is not like how much somebody did, but how sort of their contribution made an impact on the overall company.
That's a good way of thinking. Yes. It's like an overall, it's like a team game.
It's team game, exactly. And the reason I think what you said about the win-win, what we try to do is, okay, this is a metric, and this is a very big shift. Let's say in any company I worked in, or I'm sure every company, all the tools that is out there, they have a section called admin panel, where a manager or HR or somebody can go and look at all the insight, right? And you can get report on this and that. I'm not saying that this is fault of those systems, but the thing is, those data points can be misused or misinterpreted in so many other ways. So what we are trying to do is, okay, first of all, it's a team game. You look at the patterns and how the impact has been for the team and the company. But then more importantly, what you do is you make the person himself or herself aware of that. So it's about, what we try to do is, let's say, again, going back to a team of engineers working together. And when we are analyzing these patterns, the person himself or herself would be the first one to know about those things, and that they decide what to do with it rather than their manager or the HR or somebody else. So this is more
interesting.
This is more of, the data is there, which was wasted. Now I'm using it to grow myself, right? And if I need, and then at that point, you can decide whether you wanted your manager support or your team lead support or your HR support, and you bring them in. What is important is you yourself are being in charge of your own career, and then moving ahead in that direction.
I suppose an interesting way, and I love a good analogy, so it's a bit like having your own personal trainer for your career. And thinking about it that way, it's about bettering your career, bettering your outcomes, and it gives context to things rather than...
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry, go ahead.
This is great. Originally, this is what I was dreaming about, having this sort of somebody who could do that job for me and help me grow. And now it's your display. I knew that the work that I did or my teams did is already there, is out there. But I don't have, when I was a manager managing, like, I don't know, hundreds of people, not a manager, but like a manager's manager, I had no way of assessing that way. I could get these fancy metrics about velocity or, again, like GitHub commits or this commit or that commit, but that's not the real picture. So that's been the hardest part, honestly.
One of the most interesting things, I think I came into this podcast thinking the software was a certain way, and now I understand it so much more. We obviously met before this. Everyone knows that who listens, and I got to know you a little bit. But I also looked at the website and dug in more to the company, and actually, I think what you're doing is incredible in the sense that what you're really doing, if I understand it correctly, is you're kind of being the greatest fan, the greatest advocate, somebody who's there to make sure that they just get better and better and better, and that management really understands the impact they make, right? So that's the win-win.
Absolutely.
Sorry, that's the marketing brain.
No, I think the website needs a bit more love, and actually I'm working on that right now. But the whole website needs redefining, but I think that is the case. And this is exactly what I'm excited about, honestly. It's like the Fitbit of my career, always on me, looking at it, and that's actually working for me.
It throws me to the next question. Can software actually teach a bad manager how to lead better? So like if we're going up the chain and bad is obviously somewhat subjective, but then it depends on how you measure things, like you said, right? Like, let's say that your way of measuring a bad manager and let's just say that we assume the metric, right? We know what it is, but actually it's very difficult because it might be some people give bad feedback, right? Or we could say that the team is not performing. There are two ways of looking at it. One is theoretically quantifiable and one isn't. It's interesting if we're talking about context. I just thought I'd ask the curveball question and say,
Yeah.
could this also make a manager better at what they're doing?
Look, I'd been a bad manager, in all honesty, right? I was,
I'm sure you haven't.
no, I have been. I was a good engineer, and then I got to be a manager, and I suddenly had to understand what it means by people, what it means by performance and everything. And I pretended for a long time, but I really sucked at it. So I can relate to that, like what it means by a bad manager and what it means suddenly. So you're not a bad person. You want to do the right thing, but you just suck at it. And then I hope I became a better manager over time, a better people person. And one of the reasons that happened is first realization that you can't be a good people person just by writing good code. So just realizing like there's so much more to this than just like being more senior. But I think more importantly, a lot of the managers, and again, like this is probably more true in the engineering context, like the technical engineering context. They're really good analysts, right? They're really good at like analyzing data, dashboards, this and that, and they're very logical in their thing.
Yeah.
Numbers, exactly, and like very good when you put some sort of logical explanation in something, they understand it. They're really excited about it. If you keep things gray, and I really struggled with that, is like I just want to live in the gray zone. So I think what is important is giving them the right insights. First of all, it starts with like first of all realizing what a good insight is, right? You don't look again don't go for like output based metrics. And there are hundreds of tools out there, by the way, which are selling that. And again, they have a value, but then there's plenty of like attraction or misunderstanding like that you can cultivate. So don't go for the output based metric, but go for like really realizing what the outcome has been. What is the real impact of that person, right? Think about not just like their delivery, but also about the overall impact in the business, like whether it is a value, what the company values are, how they relate to the company value, how to demonstrate those company values, like are they being the team player or not, right? Are they bringing everyone together, right? And these are like the personality trade-offs as well. That's something somebody can develop, can not develop. But to your question, my biggest sort of thing is, look, technology can definitely help a bad manager be more aware of where the lacks are, how you can be better. It can bring the right sort of metrics and in the right way for the people. Like a lot of these things I'm talking about, they were not even there in the first place, right? Like you didn't even know these things exist. Metrics which are based on soft skills, based on like people's behavior, are almost non-existent right out there.
Yeah, they are. You're right.
So first battle is like, let's say if you are managing me, if you get to see what my strengths are, not just what my growth areas are, how I have been demonstrating company values, how like perception for me or the vibe for me has been changing while I'm working with my team members, right? These are things which are really hard to measure if you just look at people's commits. And these are the things that really, really matter if you think about like the overall personality of the person. And then like what you can do with that sort of metrics and data is you can then think about like, okay, I know Sachin is really good at doing these kind of things. These are his strengths. Then, the next time when I'm thinking about some sort of problem solving, I know who's the best person for this job. Like giving out these metrics, which are otherwise very hard to sort of see, is definitely helping. The other thing, which sort of, again, like this might sound like a little bit of a ClarityLoop advertisement, but I think we built out some really sophisticated AI in the product. So what we have is like this role modeling AI. Like I struggled to have hard conversations in the past, and I'm sure a lot of people do, right? Even if you're a good manager or bad manager. But as a manager or as a coach, this is one of your biggest responsibility to have hard conversations. So what the platform does is like it lets you role play conversations. So platform can't pretend to be some other person. And when I say pretend, I genuinely mean that person's traits, because the platform knows about a lot of that person's traits. And you can have that safe environment conversation, private conversations. And then once you are happy, once you've explored, like bounced around all the ideas in a safe environment, then you can go and talk to that person.
That's really cool. And I think that's another one of the undersold features on what you're doing, because one would think the idea of soft skills and personal skills and relationships are personality traits, right? Would be very difficult to turn into some form of, I guess, management coach or conflict coach or whatever we want to call it, right? I think that's really cool. And actually, totally should make more of that, because everybody hates the difficult conversations, don't they? So interestingly, the sort of, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, in terms of like, I feel like you're contrarian in the way that you've done it with your enterprise software and actually with building the business. I just wanted to dive in a little bit more because I did touch on it a little bit early. We were talking about the idea that sort of Y Combinator, all of the incubators, talk about building the MVP, launching in weeks and getting, 10 users, whatever, right? Now, you obviously did the exact opposite, and you spent like 10 months building a massive platform for a single client. I wonder, for people listening who are doing enterprise software, and this is incredibly useful, if you could go back in time and be honest, this is the No BS podcast for that sort of stuff, what would you do differently if you could go back and do something differently?
Some of the classic things which like other people advise and I didn't follow. One of those things I will give you, like I spent a lot of time with customer, which unfortunately didn't turn out the way it should happen. Like literally spent three months working with them, helping them, supporting them. There was no commitment, obviously, because they were early design partners. But then the product was in a mature shape. I worked with them, and I think after 3 to 4 months, they decided to not engage the right way, right? I mean, they sent me a message like 2 days ago or something, but that basically classic, one of those bad customers sort of interaction I had. And the reason that could happen is because I was too scared to talk about pricing. I was too scared to bring up that I will talk to you once I have some sort of contract in place or something in writing or something like some.
You wanted it to be very formal, did you? Is that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Part of me felt like if I could do something differently going forward, now I know that, especially in the B2B space, you would be surprised how many sort of businesses are there which on paper look really good, but they have a really bad culture, or they really are like almost like running as like a single person company who are making every decisions very sort of just one person deciding everybody's job kind of thing, right? Basically, don't just believe the people you talk to, right? You have to sort of treat them as like they are a business, and businesses run like you need to get their commitment early before you spend your too much time on that. And that commitment could just be, get them to sign a contract, so sign some sort of trial contract, or get them to pay something. Don't give them out free, or don't be too generous, for no reason. So that's been the hardest part for me to learn, honestly, like not being too generous.
I suppose, you're also saying the idea that, especially when you've got an idea and you're excited about that idea, and you find someone else who's excited about your idea, and then you think, wow, I've got a customer here. They talk to you, you're very open, you share all the information. I've heard this many times, or a version of this, where they then work for X number of months with that person, and they're like, they'll definitely sign, we're good, this is all going forward. They keep saying yes, 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 and then it doesn't work out. So that is great advice. Like, test it with real money, as in you're getting like asked for something, because you are investing your time, you are at the very least.
It's such a hard thing to do. Again, like if I was creating a video about like a YC advice style video, I'd probably say it with a lot of confidence, but I know how hard it is because you are desperate. You need validation.
You're getting started.
You're getting started. And you're like, fine, like it's fine. But I think at the end of the day, it doesn't work in your favor. It would have been a good advice if it was sort of work. The thing is, like the way humans work are, if you don't commit somebody to do something, they wouldn't necessarily do it if it's not very important for them, right? Unless it's a hair on fire for them, then it's fine. The way I have seen people working is, what's in it for me? If I do this, what do I get in return, right? Or I'm now committed, so I have to continue with it. And then they realize, oh my God, that was such a great thing I did. In my case, honestly, like I feel that they got the value, they understood the value, but they didn't commit themselves enough to fully realize the value, right? And I think that is very common. So you need that initial commitment, either money, either contract or whatever in the beginning.
As a completely bootstrapped company, how did you get, a company with 800 employees to say yes to you? And it's not just the 10 months you committed, right? It's about building trust. That experience and that level of deep relationship building, there surely is something that you could share to every founder listening about how you built such a good relationship.
One of the biggest reason was because I got to talk to them quite early on that stage, right? So they felt like this is sort of building out for their needs, and that's been the case. So that's been one of the biggest reasons, I would say. Like one of those early sort of champions of your product, or like early people who are involved, that goes a long way for sure. So definitely use that as much as possible. There has been so many ups and downs throughout that 10-month journey where like multiple times I felt this is not going to happen. So be ready that you will go through those sort of phases where you will have ups and downs, right? But important thing is like just don't lose it. So I just kept it in my head. I was like, okay, even if it goes down or doesn't happen, I have no expectation, but I'll consistently, persistently keep on working and pushing for it. That's another sort of meta thing, which I'm sure everybody knows. I suppose the biggest thing has been listening and then showing it as fast as possible. Most of the big companies, this company is like 1,000 people almost. They are so fed up with bigger incumbents in that area. So let's say in my space, like the performance engagement HR space, there are many big companies out there. I can tell you for sure, most of their customers are unhappy, right? Because this space is much more enterprisey than like probably other, let's say other more cutting edge spaces. And you need to tap into that anger. So I did that. Like I will bring those conversations up. I will try to sort of use that to my advantage when I'm talking to them, right? Oh, they can't do that. Nice. So I knew that they couldn't do it. So I will try to sort of emphasize on that part as much as possible. I will build it out in that way that this part of my product is really shiny. Like we're creating the differentiator that is really sort of double down because they don't have it. You are a founder, and if you're not like in any sort of constraints in the beginning, then you can commit to providing as much support as possible to these companies, right? And that's one of the reasons, like I was always there. So I will use every opportunity in the book to sort of have a conversation with them. I will try to make it like a regular conversation, so like a bi-weekly thing or weekly thing or whatever. Like I will try not to lose that touch or contact in any way. That was hard. Like imagine the people I was talking to, they were employees of those companies, that company, right? They would have not a very big reason to talk to me because I'm just a startup, like this one guy, right? So I had to really work hard to make sure that they come on the call and they get something out of it. And this will change as you go. So sometimes it will be like, oh, let's just talk about this particular problem that you have in this platform. And I wanted to sort of ideate this thing with you guys. And I know that you have been struggling with this. And then someday it could be like, oh, look at this cool thing that I built. I'm going to give you a demo, right? And then eventually that got into a habit. And then it became like a thing. So yeah, that's how it evolved for me.
What I believe you're saying, and again, many of the lever of analogies is you've got your competition, which are giant oil tankers. You're a speedboat. You can quickly adapt and sorry, I love my analogies, but I just think of it like that. Like a lot of people, and I think that's gold. Like anybody listening who is like Sachin, building something, you've got really well-established competitors. The fact that you're small and you're adaptable and you're contactable and you're relationship focused gives you a massive advantage to build something that they really love and are very enthusiastic about. Is there anything you want to add to that point? Do you agree?
No, 100%, 100%. I think this is such a great point because like as a technical founder, like there's a part of me which always say like, if I'm going to build the best product out there, people are going to buy it, right? Or I just need to build that. But really, that's not true at all. They don't care. I mean, obviously, when they're using the product, you can't have a suboptimal experience, right? But for them to even use the product, you need to spend so much more time building that relationship. So one thing I realized, and I was always pleasantly surprised, was people are much more sort of early adopters. It's almost like once you talk into a business, right? There's this initial sort of door opening exercise where like whether we even care about that conversation or not. And if they do, once you're inside the door, or like once you just open the door, then you will be surprised like how much people want to talk to, startups, or like are very sort of generous as well as adventurous. Right. So yeah, so I think as you said, like this speedboat thing, right? People want to be on that speedboat. I have people right now who enjoyed it so much the last 10 to 12 months that, yeah, there's been plenty of times, can I be on this speedboat now? Can I, like join you on this speedboat, or can we do it together? That sort of thing. So they love it.
It's amazing because it's also goes back to the value point. How do you become invaluable? How do you become irreplaceable? How do you become absolutely essential? It's by building that relationship with enterprise clients, especially if you're in B2B. If you're in B2C and you sell an app at 99p a month, please don't spend all your time with one client or user. There's no point. That is not the route to success. You need volume, right? It's been really interesting talking to you, Sachin, and I hope that you'd be willing to come back again, share with everybody how you're getting on, how it's all developing in some point in the future, maybe in 6-9 months time, whatever it may be. Because a lot of guests really do like the idea of coming back, and a lot of people message me and say, would love to hear the future. Only if you say yes, and there's no pressure, you can say no.
No. I would love to, Mike. And I think I really loved our conversation as well. Felt very comfortable.
And I'm sure that there'll be a couple of things that I'll say, oh man, I wish I had that question when we were talking, but it's just been such a free flowing and comfortable conversation. And for those of you watching, that it's fairly free reign, it's all about having those honest conversations. And that's why we touched on everything. Please do, if you're interested in finding out about how to make your team, your employees, your managers work together more effectively and everybody better as a whole, check out ClarityLoop and hook up with Sachin on LinkedIn. I will pop all the details down below, whether it's in the Apple, Spotify show notes or on YouTube. And please do subscribe. Thank you very much for joining me and joining Sachin today. Thank you, Sachin.
Thank you.